So, I want you to imagine, just for a second, if everything you know about the past, like every single historical event you learned about in school, was actually just this, you know, carefully curated, heavily edited story.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's quite a premise to start with.
Right. I mean, think about it. Every timeline you painstakingly memorized, every historical hero you ever admired, what if all of that was just a narrative designed specifically to manipulate you?
It's a profoundly unsettling thought experiment, honestly.
It really is. Imagine opening up a history textbook and suddenly realizing, you aren't actually reading facts. You're reading this meticulously crafted script written by the victors.
Yeah, a script designed to keep you looking in the exact direction they want
Yes.
and feeling exactly what they want you to feel.
Exactly. And that feeling, that unsettling feeling of the ground just sort of shifting right underneath your feet, that is exactly what we are getting into today.
Because we rely so heavily on history to anchor us, to tell us who we are, how our societies were built.
Yeah, how we got here in the first place.
Right. And to suddenly question the very foundation of that knowledge, well, you start wondering where the solid ground actually is.
So today we are doing a deep dive into this incredibly provocative essay. It was written by an author named Xu Feng in March 2024, and it's titled Historical Records Cannot Be Entirely Trusted.
And our mission today is really to explore this radical argument he makes about the unreliability of history, the inherent danger of secondhand information, and where, if anywhere, really, we can actually look to find objective truth.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Wu Feng, he doesn't just say, like, oh, historians occasionally make mistakes or sometimes they get a date wrong. No, he comes right out of the gate with a massive paradigm-shifting claim.
He really does. He basically argues that relying solely on historical records actually proves a lack of independent thinking on the part of the reader.
Wait, really? A lack of independent thinking just for reading history?
Yeah. He characterizes most historians, or really any narrators of history, as essentially mouthpieces for deception.
Man, mouthpieces for deception, that is harsh.
It is. But, I mean, the foundational premise here is that historical records are almost always written at the behest of those in power.
Oh, I see. So the people with the gold make the rules kind of thing.
Exactly. If power dictates the pen, the record automatically becomes a tool for influence rather than, a vessel for truth.
That makes intuitive sense, especially when you consider the stakes of those ancient empires. Like,
Yeah.
if you're the emperor and you can literally have a historian executed for writing something unflattering.
Right. The final draft is obviously going to make you look like a benevolent genius.
Of course it is. You're not going to approve a scroll that says you were a terrible leader. And Xu Feng really breaks down the anatomy of this bias, right?
He does, yeah. He explains that true objectivity is practically impossible for us as humans simply because of our innate structural positions in society.
Yeah, he gives these really stark examples in the text. Like he says the poor cannot impartially judge the rich.
Mm-hmm. And those who seize power are never going to fairly evaluate the achievements of the predecessors they just, violently overthrew.
Right. I mean, Shui Feng is tapping into a really fundamental truth about the human condition here. We're entirely bound by our context.
Yeah, our class, our status, our personal interests, even our beliefs, they all operate as this constant, inescapable filter on our perception.
He specifically notes that the defeated cannot objectively assess the victorious racist.
Exactly. And someone who has suffered a deep injustice cannot impartially reflect on objective facts.
Because we view the world through a lens crafted by our own highly specific experiences and traumas. The human brain isn't just like a passive recording device.
No, not at all. It's an active interpreter.
I mean,
It prioritizes information that aligns with its own survival and its own worldview.
think about it like trying to get an objective, totally unbiased recap of a championship sports game. But you're only allowed to interview the most diehard, face-painted fans of the losing team.
Wow. Yeah, you are definitely not getting an objective recap from them.
Right. You are simply not going to get a factual statistical breakdown of the referee's calls. You're going to get this highly emotional, deeply skewed narrative about how the entire game was rigged from the start.
Because the bias is completely baked into their perspective. It's inescapable for them.
Exactly. But I have to stop here and push back on this premise just a little bit.
Okay, what's your pushback?
I get the victor's bias in ancient kingdoms. I totally do. But surely there are academic historians today, modern scholars, who dedicate their entire lives to objective truth.
Right.
Like, is he really saying even the most rigorous, well-intentioned scholar is just a mouthpiece for deception?
Well, Xu actually anticipates that exact objection. He argues that even those who deeply respect people and genuinely want to respect the facts will still end up distorting the truth.
Wait, really? Even if they're genuinely trying to be fair?
Yes, because the distortion doesn't actually require malicious intent or some grand political agenda. It happens simply due to the limitations of human understanding and consciousness.
But how does that work mechanically? Like, if someone is trying their absolute hardest to just write down exactly what happened, how do they still distort it?
It really comes down to the sheer bandwidth of human consciousness. You can only understand an event through your own level of awareness and your own conceptual framework.
Oh, I think I see what you mean, because there's just too much happening at once.
Exactly. When an event happens, there are millions of data points, emotions, environmental factors, really subtle social dynamics. The historian, no matter how rigorous they are, has to select which details actually matter.
Right, they have to curate the information just to write a cohesive book.
Yeah, so they might emphasize one detail because it resonates with their particular academic background, while entirely omitting a detail that was actually the defining factor for the people who actually lived it.
And then over time, as this well-intentioned but highly filtered retelling is passed down, it drifts further and further from the original reality.
Precisely. The essence is lost not through malice, but through the inherent bottleneck of human perception.
Okay, but if every individual's brain is naturally filtering and bottlenecking reality like that, how do we end up with one dominant narrative?
What do you mean?
Well, because we do have standard official histories that entire societies accept as the truth. If everyone's bias is different, there has to be some mechanism that forces a single story to the top, right?
Yeah. That is exactly where the essay moves from individual cognitive limitations to systemic manipulation.
Oh, so there's an actual playbook for this.
There is.
Yeah.
Swiffing outlines a very specific, chillingly effective, step-by-step playbook for how this manipulation happens on a grand scale.
Okay, walk me through the playbook. What's step one?
The very first step in covering up wrongful acts, according to the text, is to invert right and wrong.
Wait, invert it. You don't just hide a bad deed, you reframe it entirely.
Exactly. You confuse truth with falsehood right from the genesis of the event.
So you basically make the villain the hero and the victim the aggressor.
Yep, that's the inversion.
But why a total inversion? Why not just like a slight exaggeration to make yourself look a bit better? Why go completely upside down?
Because a total inversion forces a completely new baseline of reality. If a regime commits a terrible atrocity and simply tries to downplay it, the debate remains centered on the atrocity itself.
Oh, right. People are still arguing about the bad thing you did.
Exactly. But if they completely invert the narrative, like claiming the atrocity was actually a heroic defense against a dark conspiracy, they completely disorient the public.
That makes sense. It completely shifts the entire framework of the conversation.
However, a narrative built on a total inversion is incredibly fragile, because there will always be witnesses who know the actual truth.
Which means the people in power have a problem on their hands.
Right. And that fragility necessitates the author's second step: intimidation.
Intimidation. So basically the muscle, threats, violence, or the complete eradication of dissenting voices.
Unfortunately, yes. Because if the official story is an inverted lie, the very existence of anyone speaking the truth is an existential threat to the people in power.
The dissenters literally have to be silenced to protect the new baseline.
Yeah. And once the opposition is successfully silenced and the physical threat to the narrative is removed, the regime can move to step 3, which is glorification.
Glorification. Okay, so this is where the media apparatus takes over.
Exactly. Use words, images, and as the essay notes in a modern context, edited videos to glorify the deeds of those in power.
So you just flood the zone with positive reinforcement of this newly inverted truth.
Yep, until the sheer volume of the glorification drowns out any lingering doubts.
The end product of this entire 3-step process, the inversion, the intimidation, the glorification, is what Shuifeng calls the glorious facade.
The glorious facade. It's a great term for it.
It really is. It's a highly polished, entirely fake version of history that completely obscures whatever the original truth was.
And it works. It really does.
When I was reading that section, I had this profound realization. You start looking at monumental historical narratives, and you have to wonder, am I looking at a load-bearing structure of human history, or am I just looking at a Hollywood movie set?
Well, that's a brilliant way to phrase it. Just a painted piece of plywood propped up by 2x4s in the desert.
Exactly. It means the history we consume, the stuff we build our national identities on, is often just the final successful product of a ruthless propaganda campaign.
And if kings and emperors are building these elaborate facades to protect their power and legacy, it naturally leads to a pretty terrifying question about the foundation of human culture as a whole.
Which is what?
Well, what about the texts humanity protects the most fiercely? Like, are any records safe from this process of systemic distortion?
Yes, that is exactly the next frontier the essay crosses. If the history of empires and nations is suspect, what about humanity's sacred ancient texts?
And Feng doesn't shy away from this at all. He brings in monumental examples that have shaped billions of lives. The Bible, Buddhist scriptures, and the Tao Te Ching.
Right. Now, before we dive into this part, I need to jump in here, just to be completely clear for everyone listening. We're not taking a stance on the spiritual divinity or the religious truth of these texts today.
No, definitely not. We are purely looking at Sui Feng's framework for the mechanical, human process of preserving and transmitting historical information over long stretches of time.
Exactly. Looking purely at those mechanics of preservation, Sui Feng argues that unless these monumental texts were directly written by their original authors, like in their own hand, at the time of the events, they simply cannot be considered entirely reliable.
His core point is that anything compiled by later generations, copied by scribes over centuries, or written down from memory years after the original events occurred, is inescapably subject to human distortion.
And the mechanism here is fascinating when you think about it practically. Think about compressing a digital photograph.
Okay, the JPEG analogy, I love this.
Right. Every time you save a JPEG, the algorithm makes tiny, almost invisible guesses about the pixels just to compress the file size.
Yeah, and with one or two saves, you really don't notice a difference at all.
But if you download and resave that image 1,000 times, those tiny algorithmic guesses compound. The image loses its original resolution, the colors shift, and it starts developing these strange digital artifacts that were never in the original picture.
That is a perfect way to look at it. The human scribes and the councils, they are the compression algorithm.
Exactly. A scribe in the 4th century might tweak a single word to make a passage more understandable for their specific cultural moment.
Or a religious council 100 years later might compile different historical accounts and simply choose to leave out the ones that don't fit their current theological goals.
And they aren't necessarily trying to destroy the truth, right? They might genuinely believe they are clarifying it.
But the result is exactly the same. With each pass through a new human lens, according to the text, the record loses a bit of its original essence.
The human element basically guarantees that artifacts of bias, cultural context, and political pressure will be introduced into the text.
Yeah, permanently altering the high-resolution truth of the original moment.
It is honestly staggering to think about the sheer volume of human history that has been subjected to that exact compression process.
It really is. But what's interesting is that Schoeffing doesn't just leave us in the ancient world with this idea.
No, he doesn't. He connects this grand, overarching philosophical skepticism to a very immediate, very raw, modern experience.
Right, because he didn't arrive at this conclusion by dusting off scrolls in some secluded monastery.
No, the catalyst for this entire essay was the modern internet.
Yeah. Schoeffing shares a very personal anecdote in the text regarding an online video.
And this video misrepresented an initiative called The Second Home, which was created by Lifechanyuan, an organization he is deeply associated with.
The essay describes how this online video labeled The Second Home as an evil home. And Schoeffing states that every single claim in that video was completely fabricated.
He says it turned the facts completely upside down.
Yes. It wasn't just a matter of someone having a slight misunderstanding of their practices. He claims it was a total inversion of reality.
A total inversion. There's that concept again.
Exactly. The video didn't just misrepresent the truth, it actively reversed it for public consumption.
So you can see the direct, real-time parallel to the historical playbook we discussed earlier. Step 1. Invert right and wrong.
Yeah, he experienced the process firsthand. Someone took a reality he knew intimately, inverted the truth for an audience, and presented a terrifying facade.
And Zhu Feng writes that this specific, highly personal experience deeply reinforced his realization that historical records simply cannot be trusted.
Because if someone can so easily fabricate a narrative today, in an era where we have smartphones, instant communication, and endless fact-checking tools.
I mean, imagine what a motivated ruler could do 1,000 years ago when they were literally the only one who controlled the printing press. or the only one who even knew how to write.
The barrier to creating a glorious facade was virtually non-existent back then compared to now.
That's such a good point. And he expands this warning well beyond his own personal anecdote to encompass the entire digital landscape we navigate every single day.
Yeah, we often operate under this naive assumption that the internet is this great democratizer of information.
Like, we think that because everyone has a voice, the truth will naturally float to the top and can't be hidden.
But Griseng argues the exact opposite. He states that no online statement can be fully trusted, especially those coming from powerful circles who have the financial and technological means to define the narrative.
He gives a highly relatable example from the text about celebrity-endorsed medicine ads.
Oh, right. We've all seen those.
Yeah, you're scrolling online and you see an ad with a famous, trusted face making wildly exaggerated claims about how this specific pill will completely change your life.
And the production value is incredibly high, the claims are bold, and the ad is just ubiquitous. It follows you across every single platform.
But Shusung points out the sobering reality. The actual efficacy of that medicine can only be known through personal use and validation.
Right. The ad is just a modern digital facade.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is...
Oh, I was going to say, what's fascinating here is the ultimate irony of our current era.
Oh, go ahead, yes.
We live in an age of infinite, instantly accessible information, yet we are actually drowning in reposted, algorithmically distorted hearsay.
Wow. Algorithmically distorted hearsay. That hits hard.
Powerful circles dictate the narrative today, just as emperors did in antiquity. The mechanisms have just evolved.
So the intimidation and glorification now happen via algorithmic suppression, manipulated videos, and viral repetition rather than, by royal decree or the sword.
Precisely. Just because a million people retweeted or shared something doesn't magically transform it into a first-hand verified account.
It just makes it incredibly popular hearsay.
Which really brings us to the core emotional and philosophical tension of this entire deep dive.
Yeah, because if modern algorithms are doing the exact same thing ancient emperors did, it makes me wonder, is the takeaway here just a total paralyzing paranoia?
It's a fair question to ask.
I mean, if ancient history is a facade written by victors and the modern internet is an echo chamber of distorted hearsay, are you supposed to trust absolutely nothing? How do you even function in society with that worldview?
Swaifeng acknowledges this exact dilemma, actually. He frames it as a profound human paradox.
Okay, what's the paradox?
On one hand, if we blindly believe everything we read in the historical record or everything we see online, we risk being fundamentally deceived. We basically surrender our autonomy and become unwitting pawns in someone else's constructed narrative.
That sounds awful. But on the flip side...
If we swing the pendulum entirely in the other direction, if we become entirely cynical, reject all information, and view absolutely everything as a lie, we risk missing out on great opportunities.
Right. We might close ourselves off from genuine wisdom, vital knowledge, or really beautiful experiences simply out of a fear of manipulation.
Exactly. We isolate ourselves.
So his conclusion to this dilemma is what?
It's stark and it's uncompromising. Ultimately, whether to believe or not rests entirely on our own individual judgment.
We cannot outsource our critical thinking.
No. We cannot hand over the responsibility of truth-finding to historians, to ancient scribes, or to internet consensus. We have to take on the heavy burden of personal validation ourselves.
But, how do you actually do that in practice? If human records are inherently flawed and the internet is totally compromised, where do you look for a baseline of reality?
This is where Shuefeng offers what I think is the most beautiful, deeply poetic concept in the entire essay.
I love this part. He introduces his ultimate solution, abandoning our reliance on human records entirely and instead learning to read the wordless book of heaven.
The wordless book of heaven. It is such a profound philosophical shift. In the text, he defines reading this book as observing the sky, the earth, people, objects, and all phenomena in nature.
It's the radical idea that reality itself, like the physical, unedited, natural world, is the only historical record that hasn't been compromised by a PR team.
That's exactly it. A tree growing in the forest doesn't have a hidden political agenda.
Right. The turning of the seasons isn't trying to invert right and wrong to cover up a crime.
Gravity isn't trying to sell you a celebrity-endorsed medicine.
Exactly. Unlike books written by humans, which are forever stained by cognitive bias, physical limitations, and the endless pursuit of power, Shuefeng suggests that the wordless book of heaven reveals the purest words of the greatest creator.
It is an unmediated, first-hand experience with objective truth.
Because, as he notes earlier in his argument, true historical reality is technically unknowable to us because we cannot time travel to personally witness it.
Right. Therefore, the only thing we can ever truly, indisputably know is what we are personally experiencing and witnessing right now in the natural order of things.
It is such an incredibly grounding thought. When the noise of human history, political narratives, and internet hearsay gets too loud and disorienting, you have an escape hatch.
You really do. You just close the textbook, shut the laptop, and look at the sky. You observe the Earth.
You look at the objects and the people interacting right in front of you in real time. That physical reality is the only untampered manuscript we actually have access to.
It strips away all the exhausting layers of human interpretation. It demands that you be completely present.
And it forces you to trust your own senses and to find lasting wisdom, not in the carefully curated words of the powerful, but in the silent, undeniable, and unfiltered reality of the natural world.
It is a remarkable intellectual arc,
Yeah.
really, moving from a position of radical skepticism regarding the external human world to a profound, quiet trust in direct personal observation of the natural world.
It really is. So let's tie this whole conceptual journey together for you guys. We started by questioning the very foundations of the historical records we grew up learning.
Right, recognizing that structural bias and the mechanics of power often turn official history into nothing more than a glorious facade.
We then explored how this isn't just an ancient phenomenon confined to dusty scrolls, but a playbook being executed right now on our phones and laptops, where digital manipulation and algorithmic hearsay constantly try to dictate our reality.
And finally, we arrived at this incredible anchor of truth. The realization that personal experience and the direct observation of the natural world, the wordless book, are our most potent defenses against deception.
But before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final mind-bending thought to mull over.
Okay, hit me.
We've spent this entire time talking about applying this radical skepticism to external history empires, religious councils, internet videos. But what if we take Su Feng's playbook of manipulation and apply it to our own internal history?
Oh, wow.
Think about your own memories for a second. Aren't your memories essentially just historical records written by your past self?
That is a fascinating application of the theory. We are effectively the sole historians of our own lives. We are the emperors of our own internal narratives.
And just like Su Feng argues, the defeated cannot objectively assess the victorious, and the person who suffered injustice cannot impartially reflect.
Yet we know from modern psychology that human memory is incredibly malleable. Every time you recall a memory, your brain is actively reconstructing it and often rewriting it.
Exactly. We suffer from cognitive dissonance when our past actions don't align with our current view of ourselves as good, rational people. So how much of your own personal history is actually a glorious facade?
Just as a political regime cannot survive the dissonance of its past crimes, the human ego struggles to survive the dissonance of its past mistakes. It is entirely plausible that we use the exact same playbook internally.
Right. How many past arguments with a friend or old romantic breakups or career failures have you subconsciously edited over the years?
How many times has your brain quietly inverted right and wrong, intimidated your own feelings of guilt into silence, and glorified your own actions just to make sure you remain the righteous hero of your own story?
It is a profoundly humbling realization. We might be manufacturing our own internal propaganda just as effectively as any ancient ruler manipulating a court scribe.
That's so true.
So the next time you open up the historical textbook of your own mind, take a step back and ask yourself, are you remembering the objective truth, or are you just reading a carefully curated, heavily edited story designed to protect your ego and make you feel good? Until next time, keep observing the wordless book and never stop questioning the narrative.